The little girl was just playing with her older sister on the boat. Her father yelled and scolded her severely, saying, "Come here, you've done something wrong." He shouted at her and interacted with her harshly. The boy standing beside them witnessed this scene with great horror. He used all his strength to push the man down to the ground. Kya, afraid that her father might be hurt, quickly shoved the boy aside. At that moment, the wife also rushed over, concerned about her husband's condition, but unexpectedly the husband started interacting with her. The turmoil in the family continued late into the night. The little girl could only cover her ears to avoid everything. The next morning, while she was getting water, she heard the heavy sound of a door closing. She hurried to the door and saw her mother packing her things, preparing to leave. When she ran out of the room, her mother had disappeared. Although her mother never returned, the family interactions continued. Months later, the siblings gradually left the house. The last to leave was Jody. He wanted to take his younger sister with him, but was powerless as he hadn't even finished his own affairs, let alone take care of another person. Before leaving, he kept warning Kya, "You must be careful. If you find yourself in danger, hide deep in the swamp where the crayfish sing." From the lessons learned from her siblings, Kya learned how to live with her father. She tried to avoid him as much as possible. To protect herself, Kya never bothered him. She often went alone deep into the swamp where the trees were lush and green and small animals would often appear. She understood the survival rules of nature. One day she got lost in the swamp and encountered the boy who had once helped her. His name was Chase and he was Jody's friend. Seeing Kya's situation, Chase said, "It's okay, I often get lost too." With Chase's company, she finally made it back home safely. The boy, full of sunshine, seemed to calm the tension in Kya's heart. There was something about Chase that made her feel emotions beyond just hurt for the first time. This gave her courage. For the first time, she went to her father and said, "I'm hungry." Perhaps feeling guilty about the family this time, her father wasn't angry. He took her to the store in town where he bought a bag of flour and some food. Jamin and Ma Ben, the store owners, were a kind and gentle couple. Mrs. Ma Ben knew about Kya's family's situation, but she didn't openly reveal it. Instead, she gently advised Kya to go to school and secretly gave her a lollipop. After that, the little girl truly listened to Mrs. Ma Ben's advice and tried going to school. However, her classmates mocked her, calling her dirty and refusing to sit with her. That was also the last day she attended school. She felt that learning from nature was more important. For a while it seemed that her father treated her quite well. He would take her fishing, and when he found out she liked feathers, he even gave her his military backpack. One day she received a letter from her mother and the girl was very happy. But after reading it, her father burned the letter and told her that her mother would never return. That night, under her gaze, her father burned all of her mother's belongings. Then suddenly one day her father also left. Although it wasn't as painful as when her mother left, the loneliness was an empty feeling. After her father left, she had to face the struggle for survival. She didn't know how to live without flour. So at 4 o'clock a.m. the little girl could only cover her ears to avoid everything. She would go to the edge of the swamp to gather clams and bring them to town to sell to Jamin and his wife in exchange for food and supplies for the boat. Mrs. Ma Ben knew about her situation, so she often gathered some donations from the church for her and even taught her simple calculations. Life continued like this until October 1969. Two boys were playing when they suddenly discovered a male corpse on the observation tower. After a thorough investigation, the police determined that the victim was Tate, a wealthy young man well known in town. The estimated time of death was around 2 a.m. Tate's body was found at the base of the fire tower, while the hatch on the rooftop was wide open. Therefore, the police speculated that Tate's death might have been an accident. However, they also found traces of Tate's blood and hair on the frame below the tower. Forensic examination revealed that the blow to the back of his head was the main cause of his death. The impact to the back of his head would have caused Tate to fall with his head downwards. However, this did not align with the crime scene. Therefore, it was possible that Tate had been pushed. Despite this, there were no fingerprints or footprints on the tower, and even the victim's fingerprints were absent. However, the police found a red fiber on Tate's jacket. Upon examination, this fiber was identified as wool, but it did not come from Tate's clothing. News of Tate's death quickly spread throughout the town, causing a stir among the residents. Due to the prevailing prejudices against the swamp girl, Kya became the prime suspect. With these doubts and biases, the police went to Kya's home. They found a red hat in the room, but no sign of Kya. The police deployed 2 speedboats and found the girl deep in the swamp. Frightened by the sight of him, she jumped into the water in an attempt to escape. But how could a small girl outrun the police? Eventually she was caught under the water and charged with murder. A few days later the court would proceed with prosecution. At that time an elderly man named Tom arrived at the prison. He was a retired lawyer well known in town and one of the few people who cared about Kia. He proactively offered to defend Kia in court as he didn't believe a kind-hearted girl like her could commit murder. However, having lived alone for many years, Kia showed no response to Tom's goodwill. Before leaving, Tom gave Kia a notebook about seashells. This notebook made Kia trust Tom. She finally let go of her guard and shared the specific reasons why her parents and siblings left and the painful experiences she had endured over the years. Since her father left, Kia had lived alone in the swamp. By 1962, Kia had found a feather beneath a large tree by the edge of the swamp. She was deeply drawn to the feather. Each day there were different feathers along with food placed by the tree. There were even a few pieces of paper with messages. Although Kia didn't understand the contents of the papers, she kept them with her. One day when Kia went to the base of the tree, she saw a handsome young man. It turned out that the person who had left the boat and the feathers was Tate. He knew that Kia liked birds and their feathers, so he often came here. Kia told him that she couldn't read and couldn't understand the notes he had left. "Oh, I just mentioned that I had seen you a few times while fishing. I thought you might need some seeds and a lighter. I have extra so you don't need to go to town. I thought you would like these feathers." After that, Tate took the initiative to teach Kia to read. After all, Kia had known Tate since she was little and their relationship quickly grew closer. Although Kia enjoyed being alone, she still had childhood memories of Tate, so she invited Tate to her house to read books. On the walls of Kia's house, there were many paintings of different animals, each one drawn with great vibrancy. It seemed that in Kia's world these paintings had a certain life to them. Tate couldn't help but be amazed. During the days of reading together, Kia progressed very quickly, from simple words to sentences, then to grammar and adjectives, which were quite difficult. Kia was able to memorize them remarkably well. Soon they had finished all the books about creatures in the library. 3 times a week from summer to fall, they studied all the plants and animals, how they adapted to the changes of the earth over time. As time passed quickly, their relationship became more and more intimate. Not long after Tate's father found out about it. "Is she your girlfriend?" "She's my friend. I bring her books because people don't treat her well. She can't go to school and doesn't have a family." He didn't demand his son to obey him, but he asked Tate never to end up like him, always just a seafood dock worker. He reminded Tate not to forget his dream of going to college. The fragmented memories were interrupted by the trial. Kia was charged with first-degree murder. The victim's family demanded the harshest punishment for Kia. Tom told Kia that she had a choice called a plea bargain. If Kia was willing to plead guilty, she would be sentenced to 10 years in prison but could be released on parole after 6 years. If she insisted on going to trial, the result would either be a life sentence or immediate release in court. Kia firmly refused the first option. No matter the cost, she didn't want to spend the rest of her life in prison. The second trial quickly began. The prosecutor accused Kia of pushing Tate off the fire tower sometime between midnight and 2 a.m. on October 30th, then covering up her footprints and fingerprints. Kia's defense attorney also argued that Kia had personality traits that could have led to the killing of Tate. Seeing Kia appear anxious, Tom handed her a piece of paper with the words, "Don't panic." Tom was very cautious about the case. He argued sharply, presenting multiple scenarios and objective assessments from the townspeople. In the face of Tom's eloquent words, Kia's anxious heart began to calm down. At the same time, her memories returned to 1962. It was a sunny morning and Tate and Kia were talking by the tree. That day she saw Tate talking to his father. Kia felt that Tate's father was very kind and wanted to know more about Tate's family. Tate hesitated a little but eventually told Kia, "On my birthday my mother and sister went out to buy me a birthday fruit. Unfortunately they had an accident on the way. I'll never forget that sad past." Just as Kia was comforting Tate, a gust of wind blew by, causing the nearby leaves to rustle. It seemed that swept along by the wind, they both gently swayed together. The atmosphere became warm and wonderful. Kia's gentle gaze also made Tate's heart flutter. From that day on, Tate and Kia became a real couple. On Kia's birthday, Tate brought her a small cake. Kia saw it and was deeply moved. It seemed that all this time she had forgotten her own life, but now she was with the person she loved. Kia felt this was the happiest moment of her life. However, this was just the beginning. Along with the sound of birdsong, a flock of snow geese migrated here and landed right in front of the lovers. Unable to hold back their emotions, they embraced each other. Time passed from autumn to winter and then to spring with one constant in nature change. Tate finally received his university acceptance letter. They both had to face the inevitability of separation. Although very sad, she still hugged Tate and spent their last night together. Before he left, Tate gave her a list of publishers he hoped she could send her paintings and notes to. At least she could earn some royalties. While she wouldn't become rich, she wouldn't have to dig for clams to survive anymore. In the days Tate was absent, she returned to her solitary life. She looked forward to Tate's return every day. Finally, Independence Day arrived. She found her prettiest dress and did her makeup, arriving early at the beach to wait for him. But after a whole day and night, Tate did not appear. Heartbroken, she cried bitterly on the beach. Finally, she understood something. Tate, life and love were all the same. They all left her, but whenever she fell, the swamp would lift her up. At some point, sadness would gradually fade. Like water sinking into the sand, it wouldn't disappear, but would sink deep into the earth. Back in court, the prosecutor argued that there were no footprints or fingerprints around the victim and the fire tower. Even on the open trapdoor, there were none. Clearly, someone had deliberately wiped away all traces. Tom presented the tide chart from the early morning of that day. According to the tide chart, footprints could have been washed away by the tide. The absence of footprints could not prove she committed the crime. Tom also introduced a report from the Forestry Department. As early as last July, the Forestry Department had discovered the trapdoor was very dangerous and had sent a notice requesting the town to make repairs. However, the town had delayed and failed to do so. In response to Tom's sharp words, Kia also expressed her agreement. At the same time, her thoughts drifted back to 1968. That day when she returned from the beach, she discovered a man taking photographs in front of her house. She hurriedly sought out Juman and Ma Ben and learned that the man was an employee of a real estate developer. They had been surveying the swamp for weeks and wanted to drain it to build a resort. But her family had been gone for many years and she wasn't sure if the house still belonged to her. Ma Ben told her that she needed to find the land papers to prove the house was hers. As she left the store, she encountered Tate, the son of a wealthy family in town. He invited her to go on a boat picnic with him on Sunday. After thinking for a moment, she agreed. She then went to the land office. After checking all the documents related to the house, everything was in order, but she still needed to pay an additional $800 in taxes. When she returned home, Kia found the notes that Tate had left behind. After 5 years, she finally followed this path. She sent her manuscript samples to various publishers. The next day, she attended Chase's picnic. After the meal, they sat by the beach and Chase picked up a red seashell from the ground. She immediately named the shell along with its origin and living habits. However, Chase's mind wasn't on the shell. He gave her the shell as a gift and complimented her, saying she was very special. He then kissed her. Just as he was about to go further, she suddenly pushed him away. "I know you think I'm cheap, but I'm not something that can be bought with a picnic meal." "No, I'm sorry, I don't think you're cheap." Seeing her reaction, Chase also apologized for his forwardness. To make it up to her, he took her to his secret base, the fire tower, that had long been abandoned. Although she was familiar with the swamp area, standing on the fire tower left her in awe. It felt as though this was an old friend she hadn't seen in a long time, but she couldn't recall what they looked like. Later, Chase suggested they go to her house. Although she wasn't ready, he insisted. As soon as they stepped into her house, she saw the walls covered with paintings. It was clear that Chase didn't care much about them, but he still confessed to her. "I think you're amazing. Really, you're as free as the wind and incredibly smart. I won't push you to do anything anymore." How about that? Perhaps because she had been lonely for so long, she forgave Chase's unreasonable behavior and agreed to date him. She wasn't sure about her feelings for Chase, but at least she no longer felt alone. One morning, she saw Chase's friends in town, but didn't approach them. Instead, during one of their dates, she wanted to talk about her friends. But Chase replied that he didn't have many friends and wasn't sure if anyone truly understood him. Not long after, Kia finally received a response from the publisher. They were eager to collaborate with her. Kia shared this good news with Chase, and they went to the beach to celebrate. Kia even made a necklace for Chase out of the seashell he had picked up on the beach, attaching it to a piece of raw leather and tying it. Chase wore it constantly. Now Chase was dead, but the necklace had disappeared. Chase's mother believed that the killer had taken the necklace and that the killer was certainly Kia. This was because not long before, Chase had told his mother that he and Kia had broken up. She believed that Kia had intentionally killed him because she couldn't have him. Tom immediately objected, as the police had thoroughly searched Kia's house but had not found the necklace that Chase's mother mentioned. The story then shifts back to 1969, 6 years later, when Tate finally returned. After finishing his studies, he saw Chase and Kia deeply in love by the lake. Although he was somewhat disappointed, he didn't want to disturb them. The next day he happened to run into Chase outside a store. Chase used foul language to speak about Kia. Tate became angry and hurriedly tried to stop him, but Chase got furious. The two exchanged harsh words and nearly fought. Fortunately, Juman, the shop owner, appeared just in time and extinguished both of their anger. That night Tate went to see Kia, but she was very agitated. She didn't want to see this treacherous man again. At this moment, Tate was feeling quite down. He apologized to Kia for his past actions. "I know I've wronged you, Kia. You were right, I didn't have the courage to face you. Leaving you was the worst thing I ever did, the worst thing in my life. I know how deeply I hurt you. Like you said, I couldn't face you. Back then I thought you would never leave the swamp, that you would never live anywhere else. I thought choosing you meant giving up everything, but I've realized that the things I once thought were important, scholarships, jobs, mean nothing without you. I made a terrible mistake and I've regretted it for many years." In the end, Tate, just like before, gave Kia a feather. He told her that he was working at a nearby lab and would never leave again. After returning this time, he tried his best to gain Kia's forgiveness. However, Kia didn't know how to forgive Tate now. The next day, when Kia went to the market in town to buy vegetables, she happened to run into Chase, her boyfriend. As they were talking, three of Chase's friends appeared from a distance. Kia thought Chase would introduce her to his friends, but instead a girl claiming to be Chase's fiancée appeared. When Chase took the girl's hand and left, Kia realized that Chase had been deceiving her all along. She tried to suppress her sadness and returned home. But before she could collect her thoughts, the sound of an engine roaring outside startled her. Kia quickly ran into the forest to hide. After entering the house, Chase searched everywhere but couldn't find Kia. He angrily cursed and yelled throughout the house. Once Chase left, Kia quickly ran outside. She finally understood that she would have to live alone once again, but deep down she had known for a long time that no one would stay. Soon after, Kia's first book was finally published and she received a royalty payment of $5,000. She had also paid off the back taxes her father owed and had successfully acquired 3 pieces of land. At the same time, her brother Jody saw her book. Although he had always been searching for his sister, he never expected Kia to still be living here. Apart from Kia, Jody didn't find any other siblings. Their mother had passed away many years ago. Jody learned from his uncle that a year after leaving, their mother had missed her children so much that she wrote a letter to their father hoping to bring them to live with her, but their father had refused her request. Afterward, their mother saved money to hire a lawyer, but she eventually passed away from leukemia. The two siblings reunited and they were overjoyed. Jody also promised to visit Kia regularly. After the previous incident, Kia and Chase could no longer get back together. But as a wealthy young man, Chase felt insulted. He sought out Kia hoping to rekindle their old relationship, but Kia didn't want to see him again. In a fit of anger, Chase struck Kia and tried to force himself on her to subdue her. Kia fiercely resisted and finally picked up a rock from the ground to defend herself. "Stay away from me, you bastard. If you dare bother me again, I will kill you." She then quickly packed her things and fled deeper into the swamp by boat. Chase went looking for her but couldn't find Kia anywhere. When Kia returned home, she found that her room had been ransacked. Chase had taken out his anger on her paintings. Kia believed that for a man like Chase, the final blow would have to come from her own hand for him to be satisfied. She couldn't help but start thinking about a life of loneliness. She could bear being alone, but living in constant fear was something she couldn't endure. Kia finally understood why her mother had left. She knew she could never follow in her mother's footsteps and could never live in constant worry and fear every day. That evening, Tate visited Kia because Juman had mentioned that he hadn't seen her in a while. When he saw the bruise on Kia's face, he immediately knew that Chase had hit her. Kia was planning to go to Greenview the following week to meet with the publisher and discuss her next book, but now given her condition, she hesitated. Tate encouraged her. "Don't let him affect your life. Go to Greenview." Before Kia left, Tate even threw her the hat, and on the morning of October 29th, Kia boarded the bus to Greenview. Some witnesses in town also saw this. Mr. Forter from the publishing house could testify that on the evening of October 29th at 7 p.m. Kia had dinner with other colleagues. In his impression, Kia was shy and gentle. Although Kia was a bit reserved, everyone knew she was a genius naturalist. The dinner lasted for several hours. During the meal, Kia told the story of a female insect that devours its male mate. Although everyone found this immoral, Kia believed that nature has no dark side. It simply creates ways for survival. The next morning on October 20th, when Forta met with Kia, he did not notice any abnormalities in her emotions. This was enough to conclude that Kia was not involved in the crime. However, the defense lawyer for the prosecution did not think so. He believed that Kia may have taken the last night bus back to the town to commit the crime. After committing the crime, she then took the night bus back to Greenview and returned to the hotel. During that time, no one could prove anything. Before the jury made their final verdict, both the prosecutor's lawyer and Tom gave their closing statements. Tom had lived his whole life in North Carolina, just like everyone else here. He had also heard the rumors about the swamp girl, but the truth was that Kia was just an abandoned child, a child who grew up alone in the swamp. During the time, she was frequently humiliated and bullied. Over the years, Juman and Ma Ben had been nearly the only people in town who cared about Kia. The others labeled her as an oddball, and now the judgment of this introverted, ostracized girl was once again in the hands of the townspeople. But Tom believed that everyone here should base their verdict on the evidence presented in court, not on rumors and emotions built up over the past 5 years. The prosecution did not have enough evidence to prove it was a murder, but they wanted the jury to believe that at 11:30 p.m., despite the lack of any witnesses, Kia had boarded the last bus from Greenview to North Carolina. In less than an hour, Kia had lured Chase to the fire tower, pushed him down and killed him. Then she wiped away all fingerprints and footprints, silently taking the last bus back to Greenville. These imagined details were not the truth. They were just things people wanted us to believe. This was just another rumor about Kia. Tom believed that the people here would make their decision based on the facts, not on the gossip they had heard over the years. After leaving the courtroom, the jury deliberated for 6 hours, and the final verdict was, "We, the jury, find the defendant Kia not guilty in the death of Chase. She is free to go. On behalf of the state, I apologize for having detained her. The trial is concluded." After saying a brief goodbye to everyone, Kia was taken home by her brother Jody. Not long after Kia found Tate, she left a feather on Chase's workboat. Kia finally opened her heart, wanting to share her life with the person she truly loved. Over time, Kia published more and more books, but she never left the swamp. They painted and researched there, and the two lived peacefully together for the rest of their lives. Many years later, Kia passed away alone. She hoped that when she left, she would do so quietly, without too much noise. This time, Kia saw her mother. She smiled and walked toward Kia. When Tate found Kia, she had already left this world in the embrace of her mother. As Tate was going through Kia's belongings, he found a book. On one page, Tate discovered a portrait of Chase, and behind the portrait, a seashell necklace was hanging from a piece of rawhide. The story ends here. Thank you for watching the film. What did you think of the movie? Please leave a comment below.